How true are the stories regarding gladiators in Rome? Did they really get freedom after winning tournaments, or were they just slaves? So, gladiators were slaves. They had no rights. They were essentially property. So, we look upon Rome as a great empire, a great civilization, a great powerful force in ancient history. And what we tend to disregard because of the way we are taught history is how uh, oppressive Rome was. It was a slave owning oligarchy, which means it was a very small number of people, a very small group of people who held all the power in Rome, and a significant population, significant percentage of the population of not just Rome and Italy, but of the entire Roman Empire was slaves. So slaves were property, they had no rights, right? They could be killed or used in any manner whatsoever. And slavery began in Rome with the mythical founder of Rome, Romulus, who decreed that fathers could sell their children into slavery in order to get rid of debts, etc. So, slavery was an integral part of Roman life, of Roman culture. And the other interesting thing about Rome is the gender disparity they had. So, the gender ratio was 7 to 5 men to women. There were 7 men to 5 women because of the practice of female infanticide, which was routine and widespread. Female children were looked upon very poorly. No one wanted a female child. It was a burden. So there was this widespread, rampant practice of female infanticide in Rome, because of which the gender ratio was 7 is to 5 men to women. It's incredible, right? And coming back to slavery, so slavery was rampant. People would be taken slaves by the thousands. You know, when Julius Caesar conquered Gaul, which is present day France, he captured. I mean, he decreed people to be slaves instantaneously the moment he captured a town or village. 50,000 people at one time immediately became slaves, and they were sold off. And Julius Caesar got richer and richer by engaging in this slave trade. So not only did he plunder the resources of the Gaulish territories, the Celtic territories of Iberia, of other regions of Germania and whatnot, not only did he plunder these territories for all their resources, for gold and metals and other valuables, but he also set everybody to slavery. And these slaves were all carted off to Rome, and they were sold off in slave auctions, and and they were put to different uses. And some of them ended up as gladiators. Becoming a gladiator was also a punishment in Rome. So a citizen who was guilty of certain specific crimes could be punished to go and fight in the arena as a gladiator. So gladiators were property, they were slaves. Very, very few of them, if any, would ever get their freedom. You could not just win your freedom by winning a couple of tournaments. You were still owned by a slave owner, by a gladiator school, by a stable. They were called stables, like stables for horses. So they had stables of gladiators. And the typical lifespan was very short for gladiators. They had a very, very intense training regimen, and many of them would die in their first fight in the arena. And I think the median age at death was 27 or thereabouts. There are many cemeteries that have been found of gladiators. So these people usually have elongated right arms. The bones of the right arm are usually elongated. Most of them were right-handed, and they would practice, they would train with the sword from day to night, because of which this deformity would occur. And left-handed gladiators were advertised as a rarity because there were very few. And so where does the name gladiator come from? It comes from the name of the Roman sword, which is called the gladius. So the Roman straight sword was called the gladius, and that gave rise to the name gladiators, the ones who used the gladius to fight. So the gladiators went through intense training regimens. They had short lives. They ate predominantly a vegetarian diet, right? Which is surprising, but it has been found to be true because they have analyzed the bones of gladiators from gladiator cemeteries, and they have found through chemical isotope analysis that the diet was predominantly vegetarian, and with a great deal of barley and other grains. And there was some meat, but it was mostly vegetarian. So once again, these were slaves, these were property. It's a very interesting period of history. There was even a gladiator revolution, the third servile war, I think. So there were three servile wars in Rome. These were slave insurrections, slaves who tried to rise up against the tyranny and the oppression of Roman society. So these were three separate wars in the second and the first centuries BCE. One of these was the great gladiatorial rebellion led by a gladiator called Spartacus. He was a Scythian from Thrace. Thrace is further east from Rome. It's essentially uh, it's essentially western, the westernmost part of Turkey and north of that. So that was not Turkish at the time, that region. It was a Scythian. The people were mostly of Scythian extraction. Scythians are an ancient Indo-Iranian people. So that's a different story altogether. So a slave, a gladiator named Spartacus, who was of Thracian origin, he led this great insurrection against the Romans, this great rebellions. It actually threatened Rome itself at one point. And eventually this rebellion was crushed by the Romans. And there was this great road to Rome. I don't remember, via I forgot the name of the road. It was lined up with crucifixes, and these gladiators were all crucified for miles and miles as a warning to other slaves. So Rome was a brutal society. A significant percentage of the population was slaves, and only a small percentage of the population were actually given the title of citizens. These were the nobility, the aristocracy, the landowners, and the prosperous people. Everybody else was either plebeians, not plebeians, they were basically the commoners, non citizens, or even worse, slaves.